Aaron, where is your background?
That's Mount Hood, off the Timberline Trail.
Well, Steve, you probably knew that, but I don't hike on Mount Hood.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the mountain top, so it's like that one would have tripped me up a little bit.
Hey, folks, we are just giving a few minutes for people to sign in, and then we'll get started.
I do see some familiar names in this list, so that's nice. Good crossover between organizations.
Good.
If people can hear a beautiful person singing, I have my door of my garage open, and there's a neighbor friend who's actually ripping some sweet folk tunes down the block.
Turn it up.
I know, right?
I have neighbors who play in a band sometimes, and it's good music too. But they haven't been out in a while. All right, we've got a few more trickling in. Wait just another few seconds. All right, well, we'll get started. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us this evening it's been a little bit of a hiatus from Oregon Wild for our Wednesday webcast, but here we are, and we have a lineup for the coming month too. So glad you're here with us for our presentation on recreation on public lands. My name is Chandra Legui. I'm the Western Oregon Field Coordinator for Oregon Wild, based in Eugene. And for those of you who might be new to Oregon Wild, we are a statewide conservation group dedicated to protecting and restoring Oregon's wildlands, wildlife, and waters as a lasting legacy for Oregonians. And that, of course, includes the public lands where most of us go to hike, bike, kayak, fish, mushroom hunt, and watch birds. Hence our talk tonight about recreation. I do want to acknowledge that these public lands that we're talking about this evening encompass the ancestral lands of numerous Indigenous peoples. We want to offer gratitude for the land in this state called Oregon, for those who have cared for it throughout generations, and for the opportunity to grow, learn, work, and create community on this land. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities throughout time and into the future, and are grateful for their vibrant presence. These include members of the 9 federally recognized Indigenous nations of Oregon, as well as other tribes who have traditional connections to these lands. We want to recognize that these Indigenous peoples have enduring relationships with our public lands, and also spaces where cities, towns, farms, ranches, and timberlands have been built and managed by settlers. We recognize that Native communities were forcibly removed from their land where we now reside and play, and the continuation of harmful colonial legacies as well. Oregon Wild's dedicated to expanding our efforts to elevate Indigenous knowledge and respect for the culture, creativity, and resilience of Indigenous peoples in our efforts to protect Oregon's wildlife and wild places. We have a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, you can enter your questions at any time using the Q&A feature in Zoom, and those questions will go to me and my colleague Aaron, who is here, and we'll get to as many of those at the end of the presentation as we can. Try not to wait till the very last minute. If the screen freezes, just go ahead and exit out of Zoom or your browser and start it back up again, and that should work. We will have a video of this webcast posted on our website and emailed out to you in the near future. And for those of you who have bought raffle tickets, we really appreciate your support. having the raffle helps us put on these events and fund our conservation work. And we'll be doing that drawing tomorrow. So watch your inbox. And I'll offer the caveat that if you win the Trail Crew shirt contributed by Trail Keepers, you might have to show up and do some trail work to claim it. Next week, and let me advance my slide. Next week, we have a great webcast that will take us on some exciting paddleboarding trips with writer and athlete ambassador Crystal Marie Collins. She will be giving us the rundown on how to train and pack for ultra paddleboard missions and share a few stories. She's done some amazing trips, so I can't wait to learn more. You can sign up at OregonWild.org. All right, and now on to tonight's webcast. I think we are all well aware that in the past year, our public lands and all types of outdoor recreation has had some of the highest use ever experienced. This year is projected to see similar high use in our national forests, parks, and wilderness areas. The outdoors has been discovered, and outdoor recreation is actually starting to make some great strides towards including more and more diverse people and communities in recreation, which is all great. But at the same time, popular trails are crumbling. There aren't enough campgrounds or restrooms to accommodate demand, and public lands agencies don't have the funding that they need to address these issues. Solutions aren't easy. But we're going to talk about it anyway. We've got with us this evening Steve Kruger, Executive Director of Trail Keepers of Oregon. And he'll be giving us some of his perspective and talk about the work that they do. Then I'll jump back in to cover some more information and what to expect this year around recreation on public lands, as well as Oregon Wild's take on how some of these issues can be addressed. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So I will turn it over to Steve to take it away for the moment.
Very good. Thank you so much, Chandra and Aaron, for inviting me to come. I think this kind of came together in about like the last week or so. And quite honestly, I was like, oh, I kind of like the description of this program tonight, but maybe it doesn't fit exactly what I'll be able to speak to best. So forgive me, audience, if we don't cover every single niche and wonderful trail segment that you were wanting to find out the inside scoop on, and that that general like movement of people engaging in the outdoors through recreational means. How I'd love to start is I'm Steve. I'm the executive director of Trail Keepers. My professional background, I started off in Oregon in 2007 and was a park ranger and a lead ranger and a park manager with Oregon State Parks for over 10 years. And I started managing in the Columbia Gorge, and guess what? I got chewed up and spit out, and I decided to jump ship and go over to the nonprofit world. And that's when I was thoughtfully recruited by then board president Tom Kloster, who is still a board member of ours, founding board member, has a great founder's syndrome of not letting that go. And I'm glad for it. He's a wonderful resource and recruited me into this crazy idea of taking on Trail Keepers of Oregon as their first staff person. And here we are now in 2017, 2 months, July 1st, 2017, I started in this role, and 2 months later, the Eagle Creek fire hit. And I guess that leads me to kind of jumping in here with a slideshow of sorts with some ideas of Trail Keepers, where we've been and where we've come to now. So in 2017, when I took on this role, I thought I was going to be trying to build a nonprofit slowly but surely with a capacity grant from REI at a part-time status for only funded for about 6 months. And 2 months into the job, the Eagle Creek fire happened. And we found ourselves jettisoned into a place where we were positioned to help the most as a cooperative partner in a place that many people call their playground or their recreational space. I was heading out to places that I had once seen far greener, but then we jumped in, and TKO really is a place where we make people feel safe and welcome to experience stewardship activities on trails, doing some tough stuff that anybody can do, rock work and hand tools, grunting it out up on trails. While we were in the Eagle Creek Fire area, we've expanded to do reach projects all over the place. This is actually in the Willow-Whitman National Forest, in a volunteer vacation. We're out on the Oregon coast. This is out at Oz West, and back in the gorge. And if anybody knows this scene, the idea of walking down the historic Columbia River Highway in the middle of July without a care in the world of any vehicles up or down it. This is when the highway was closed the first time after the fire. Walking down with a Forest Service staff person in the middle. Here's up at Angel's Rest. There's the first gentleman in the middle. This is on National Public Lands Day. And if you don't know, Trail Keepers of Oregon also runs OregonHikers.org, which used to be called PortlandHikers.org. And in fact, that's kind of the founding of our nonprofit. If anybody here has ever been on that website, utilized it to get out into the woods through the field guide. Before all that field guide stuff happened, Portland Hikers was a forum that in that nerdy era of the early 2000s, people would chat about, is the snow out up on at this gate, and am I going to be able to get through, or are the wildflowers starting to pop at this favorite spot here or there? And then all the while there started to be this discussion around who's taking care of this trail here or this trail there. No one. And a hiking resource for stewardship was born. And yeah, I circled there, a service of Trail Keepers of Oregon, because not a lot of people know us as OregonHikers.org. And this view right up here is of the north view, right along the wilderness boundary of Mount Hood. This is at Old Vista Ridge, which is right off the Vista Ridge trailhead. And that trail actually was where a group of individuals, and I will say this, every trails organization starts off a little seedy and a little rogue. And our group at the time said, no one's taking care of this lost trail. It's a numbered trail on the system, and we're going to go out there and hack it back and bring it back to life. We learned very quickly that the best way to work in that regard is to create some partnership. And the nonprofit was formed in 2007, and the story goes on. In fact, our first official trail party was right here at Angel's Rest. This group going out for the first time officially as a nonprofit, helping up Angel's Rest. Striking back to the fire that occurred in the Columbia Gorge, that really jettisoned us into a different place. And we have had some pretty tough times, sad times, as one of our volunteer leaders tackles I call this kind of sometimes you eat the stump, other times the stump eats you. And I think the stump is eating our friend Pat here a little bit. We've seen some pretty awful scenes in fire affected areas in the Columbia Gorge, and now in places like the Santiam State Forest, places that had both fire damages and systemic issues. But we've also had a lot of fun out there, and you'll notice that everyone in this photo has a smile on their face, even though they're covered in mud. This is at Mile and McIver State Park. Beautiful scenes of fire recovery where ferns are popping back January, February of 2018, only, you know, six months after the fire had rolled through. And basically what Trail Keepers does is we are a stewardship first organization. You know, nonprofits have different purposes and different missions in the sense of who they serve and what their agenda is. Our organization has really found that in order to make the change that we hope, we lead with stewardship. So we partner with land managers on stewardship priorities and see that we help in as many ways as we can. The Eagle Creek fire was a great way to help in a space where resources were not going to be immediately available to restore trails as quickly as they would like. And we can come in and do that. But at the same time, you know, Trail Keepers of Oregon's mission is to protect and enhance the Oregon hiking experience through stewardship, advocacy, outreach, and education. And so advocacy definitely follows for us. And we find a place that once we've established ourselves as a cooperative partner or a stewardship volunteer engagement partner, we can actually help with advocacy in a lot of ways. Like I mentioned, a stewardship first organization in the sense of, in this photo, you see one staff person with a whole cadre of volunteers. And at this point, even though some of these people are now staff, I was the only staff person in this photo from TKO. So it takes a community of volunteers to protect the place, to enhance it, to restore it. And we do that through safety, fun, and service. Safety first, a lot of fun, and then service. This slideshow is very long. I'm going to scan through amazing photos of trails recovery and everything. Also, all of our training events and activities. If anyone is even able to keep up with all of this awesome smiling faces and cool stuff, we are a work in progress. I'll show you our website in a moment and how you can get involved, maybe during the Q&A. This is actually atop Old Vista Ridge with now retired the district ranger, Janine, and she and I are actually cutting the ribbon to Old Vista Ridge, where in 2006, when we started hacking it back, we were getting some pretty angry trail staff from the Hood River Ranger District. But through progress and partnership and actually legitimacy as a nonprofit and leading with stewardship, now we actually have the staff person sitting there with us. This was in 2018. So it nearly took 11 plus years to get us to advocate for Old Vista Ridge to be acknowledged as a trail. And here we are right at the viewpoint of Old Vista. And there's actual trail signs to boot that demonstrates our effort in doing so. Here's me and my son. And oh my gosh, there he is just a couple weeks ago. So I guess my last bit here is, if you are a person who wants to get involved with Trail Keepers of Oregon or stewardship activities at all, our website is a great space to do so. You can go right here to the main page, and under volunteer, you can join a trail party. And oh my gosh, these days, when I started in 2017, the year prior, I think we were able to pull off about between 20 and 30 events. Now we have between 40 and 50 trail party events per month. And we have 8 staff supporting that in the North and South Coast, the Portland Upper Valley, starting to work in the Salem region of the Santiam corridor, to Hood and Gorge, and having reach projects from Smith Rock State Park and Tumalo to the Umatilla National Forest, out to the Wallowas. One of the things that I did want to bring up in regards to the state of affairs, and forgive me, I was trying to find a great wildfire map before this presentation of the 2020 fires. So this is what I found. What I would like to share is just a brief glimpse of, all of those stewardship activities that I flashed through with photos of people recovering from fires. That was one 50,000 acre fire in the Columbia Gorge. In 2020, it was over 1 million acres of fire affected area. And I will say this, I think there's a lot of misconception with the news and everything. While there are literally towns and homes and families and lives lost due to these fires in 2020, in the areas, and I'm really qualifying this because I've witnessed other executive directors who have talked about wildfire as a good thing, and I don't want that to be applied to any type of human experience. And even within a natural area and a wilderness area or a public land, we never think of fire as good, but fire is something that is a part of the landscape in Oregon and in the West Coast. These fires, while they're big blobs of orange here, we have to remember that it happens in a mosaic pattern. Flashing back to that map that I showed of the Eagle Creek fire, where it's red, yellow, and green. The fire doesn't completely, in a vast swath across all of these orange blobs, just wreak complete destruction. There's wonderful green specks throughout. And but the thing that's, I think, different about this last year is the fact that these recreational zones are not nearly close to opening in any way. So for the communities that are looking to the Willamette Forest or the Clackamas Ranger District of the Mount Hood National Forest, and then as you tick down, it feels like every single spot along the way, there are recreational zones right where those fires popped up. My understanding thus far is they're not going to be opening this year. Some of these areas may not open for a few years. I think when I look back to the political pressures, the community pressures to open the Eagle Creek fire area as soon as possible, I am not witnessing those pressures as heavy. But that is also something that a community that wants to see these places brought back sooner should. Trail Keepers of Oregon has been starting to drum a beat in the Santiam State Forest, right on the gateway into the Beachy Creek fire and the Lion's Head fire zone. And that area that we've witnessed and what I've seen over the years with the Eagle Creek fire area is nature takes back very quickly. And so these trails that may have had a slow, like necessary cleaning of the understory of the forest and are not altogether completely destroyed and rock and rubble rolled all over it. They're sitting there, and we're seeing, our first growth after the fire really pop up and take back. And if we don't have a strong support from land managers, capacity for them as agencies to respond, if we don't have strong cooperative partners for trails and lands to be actually a partner in stewardship and recovery efforts, it's going to be a very long time before we see some of these places again. And then the status of recreation for 2021 this season, we'll just see our Coast Range mountains, the Oregon coast, and then every green non-orange blob that you see that has trails within it, seeing a significant uptick in use. It's not like a pretty picture when it comes to recreation in Oregon. There's definitely amazing places now that maybe with more people going to them and witnessing their beauty, they'll advocate or bring to us or bring to other cooperative partners or the land managers a sense of urgency to improve the recreational access to those places. I could see that being a silver lining here of places being either explored and brought to more new and wonderful faces and new boots coming to those places, that maybe we'll see those be considered for recreational improvements or, you know, trails access. In the short term, though, we're more than likely to see a pretty big conflict of congestion at either very popular sites outside of fire affected areas or places that maybe don't have the facility to handle that type of additional recreational use. And so all the more an opportunity for people who are very active with organizations like Oregon Wild or Trail Keepers of Oregon to make your voice heard and share with the staff and share with us your feelings when you're going out to those places. Trail Keepers has a TKO scouting platform for anyone to report back on concerns in fire affected areas or in any area that may have had damage. And that lends me to I've focused mainly on the fires of 2020 and landing on that idea of what the fires have done to places. I forgot to mention that all of this started due to a significant wind event, a historic wind event, weather event. And an example, you may have heard in the news of a group of hikers hiking near Ramona Falls just in the last, I think, week. It just came to my attention in the last few days. And some search and rescue response went out and found these hikers who had used resources on Google Maps to find access, which I would gather that folks on this call, you may already laugh at the idea of doing something like that, but also new folks are popping up in these urban areas and they know these wonderful places are out there and they use what's closest to them, albeit an OregonHikers.org has the inside scoop. And if they came to our website, it would be far better details, including places that are close to fire or a misconception of not following a Google map directions. Well, those folks got themselves in a position, and I bring it up because of that wind event. They hiked from Top Spur down towards Ramona Falls. They found themselves in a 90 plus down tree segment of trail, and unfortunately kept on going, didn't put themselves in the right place by doing so, and search and rescue efforts were initiated and got them to safety the next day. That bringing that up to folks like yourself, if you are going out and exploring the places that you know of, right? You may know, okay, well, I can't get into the Willamette Forest in these areas at all. I can't get into the Santiam State Forest. I can't get into this and that because of fire closures. Well, now you're going up and you're exploring your favorite places on Mount Hood or other sections on up and down the valley. I guarantee that now that the snow has melted out pretty early in some areas, you should expect to find significant windfall to the point of needing to turn around. An example is the PCTA on a section of PCTA to Ramona Falls that they've logged out 90 trees in a very, very small section. And we're in the process of hosting a series of complex saw trainings up on Timberline in the next month to also start to expose more expertise to very complex windfall. And so those are areas that not a lot of people, because of when the fire hit in September, and then those areas started to close due to the winter, maybe not enough folks were able to get out and report those. Now they're coming on the other end into this hiking season and starting to find that. So I would encourage you to join our TKO Scout School. You can find it on our website under how to get involved. And it is a way to report issues, and we would love to know about them. I would say that, with a staff team of 8, we have 2 staff who are focused in the Mount Hood Gorge region. Our partners, Cascade Volunteers, does a lot of service work in the Willamette Forest. But beyond that, I would love to hear all the information come roaring in through those scouting reports that you can submit. I'll probably post a link here if you'd like. Chandra and Aaron, I'd love to open it up to questions. And folks, if you want to put questions in the Q&A, I'd love to know more of what they were expecting from this talk, and see if I can help answer them or direct them in the right place.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. And yeah, we'll save questions for a few minutes from now, but people should start entering those in.
Yes.
And we will get to them very shortly. And thanks. That was all really great and pertinent and overlaps with some of the things I was going to say. So thank you. Mm-hmm. Let me share my screen again real quick and go over a couple of more things. So yeah, thanks for addressing some of that stuff around what to expect with fire and wind damage out there, because I wasn't going to cover that, and you get out probably more than I do these days, so that's really important to consider. So yeah, as much, so there's those sort of issues, and then there's closures because of fire, and a lot of trails needing work because of weather events, etc. Those are one sort of problem, but then of course we have the other sort of problem, which is that, and you mentioned this, Steve, that there are certain places where people are being funneled, right? Mm-hmm. Because of closures, or a variety of other things, such as tourism organizations like like putting out best of lists, and social media posts that people put up, and showing what a beautiful place this is. Everyone needs to check it out. The fact that we've been living through a global pandemic where being outside was one of the only things we had to do to be safe. All of that is contributing to overcrowding and some serious sort of public safety and health issues on public lands, at campgrounds, at trailheads, et cetera. And, and also just damage that people do and cause to plants and wildlife habitat and stream banks, when there is that concentration of use in places where it might not that might not be prepared for that sort of use. So, for example, I just wrote a blog and some public comments for Oregon Wild about Tamalich Pool on the McKenzie River, which has seen a huge boom in use over the last 10 years or so, as well as related issues around safety and damage to the natural environment. And that's led the Forest Service to craft a proposal to install a new parking lot with a fee, more restrooms, barriers around the pool, rebuilding a trail in a different location, banning swimming in the pool. I mean, these are consequences to overuse in a way. And there's lots of other examples of, where things like that have had to been put in place. And it's a tricky situation for managers. One of the things that I want to go over, it's kind of fundamental for everyone who goes on a hike or mounts a mountain bike or packs a picnic to public lands, is that, we need to acknowledge that human behavior needs to change, and we need to do better and be more responsible to the places that we enjoy. So I've just put up briefly here the leave no trace principles, which we all need to be practicing and becoming more familiar with. You can go to that website, lnp.org, to learn a whole bunch more. And let's see. Sorry, I have to go back and forth to different tabs here. There's other things that we can be doing while learning how to leave no trace, and that's modeling that behavior for others and telling our friends what our expectations are when they're going out hiking or enjoying public lands, passing that along, and super important. We also need to be preventing fires when we're out there. I think this is just a really important thing to remind people that most fires are caused by humans out on the landscape. And that's, in the case of 2020, it was primarily down power lines in a windstorm, but that's human infrastructure. And of course, with the case of the Eagle Creek fire, fireworks gone awry, and but anything from a campfire to a cigarette can start a fire out there in the woods. So, and really, harm everyone else's opportunities for recreation, as well as lots of other stuff going on out there. So, mind any campfire bans or fire risk updates, and just avoid having fire out there when you're reading.
And I was just going to mention too. I mean, I tend to do this. In fact, I just spent the day out at Shellberg Falls, closed currently. We had our first volunteer trail party there, open to the public, and we're going to be starting to drum a beat there and other places in the Santiam State Forest. I always talk about trail work because that's where we also host the Trail Ambassador program, which is a trailhead and on trail program. In fact, we have just teamed up, and we're essentially taking on the Mount Hood Wilderness Stewards program as basically wilderness ambassadors moving forward. And what you're bringing up, and I think a lot of the people who are probably in attendance today are like, oh, I'm an advocate of all these things, leave no trace, like making people feel safe and welcome, and, essentially mitigating visitor safety issues. I mean, shoot, I bet a lot of people on this call are wilderness stewards or, search and rescue, either current or past, and like carry extra water bottles because they see the people who show up with flip-flops halfway up whatever trail. Like those are ways to get involved and help. So I appreciate that. I also put in the chat, Travel Oregon has put together pretty comprehensive for folks on this call to share with, all the friends and family that you're like, oh my gosh, you need some help if you're going to head out into these woods. So the Take Care Out There campaign that they put together is great for folks who are just starting to access the outdoors. So sorry I interrupted, but that's another element, is the trail ambassadors for our audience who would love to get involved, whether it be sitting at a trailhead and engaging visitors, making them feel safe and welcome, but then also sharing ways to be safe out on the trail, or even like a wilderness steward, wilderness ambassador, which is a great way to help. I mean, I think the wilderness stewards in the past have found, like in a season, hundreds of unattended fires in wilderness areas that they have snuffed out before they have become a Beachy Creek fire or something like that. So it is ways to give back if you're inspired by helping.
That's great. A great reminder that it's not just trail work. Yeah, there's other good stuff out there. And I just put a couple of organizations that I'm familiar with on here, but there's other more local groups folks can get involved with. Also, just a reminder, COVID-19 is still a thing, and this slide is from last year when we were being really careful, but it's still good to keep in mind when we're out there to be considerate of others, and keep our distance, wash your hands, et cetera. A couple of other things to know that I wanted to go over in case folks aren't aware, although as you said, there's probably a pretty savvy group on here. There are new permits in place for Central Cascades wilderness areas. There's a link there, and we'll make sure that goes up on our website too, so people can find out information. That's for the Mount Jefferson, Mount Washington, Three Sisters wilderness areas. And yeah, it takes a little planning ahead, but otherwise, should be pretty accessible for folks to still get out there. Of course, there are fire closures still. So you were talking about recovering some of the trails. A lot of and also a lot of places are still closed, and we do need to be respectful of those closures. For the most part, they're for good reason. There's a lot of safety hazards, and trails just aren't ready to receive, or roads for that matter, aren't ready to receive people on them. So you can go to, for this year especially, this BLM website that I have up here, or the Willamette or Mount Hood National Forest websites, and there's pretty clear, like bright red text saying, fire closure updates. And you can find out where those are, so you can plan ahead and prepare to be, to go in a different location. Here's a couple of other resources I put up: the Oregon Hikers site, and another one I really like is Hike Oregon. She's got a lot of great resources, reviews, and trail updates on her website too. And then finally, considering all of that, where should you go outside of fire closure areas? Definitely not going to say don't go to those wilderness areas that require a permit, because those might be some of the places where you can really get away from the crowds and into the backcountry. So don't let the permits deter you. But I would recommend just trying to find someplace new. That's part of the joy of avoiding where there's overcrowding. Is do your research. Here's just an assortment of resources, and find some new places, especially Oregon's ancient forests. Sorry, shameless plug, I wrote that. Although there are a few hikes in there that are closed because of the fires from last year. Seeking out places that might be busy on weekends, but if you go on a weekday, for example, you might beat the crowds and avoid some of the problems that way. This is another good tip. And then Oregon Wild has a promotion right now for our Evergreen Hiking Club, which is becoming an Evergreen member, which means giving monthly, and we're preparing great information about hikes that we will send to you. So you can check that out there too. Ultimately, I want to just end with the fact that, all of the stuff we're talking about is kind of avoiding the major issue, not just human behavior, but how our public lands are managed, and sort of what some of the problems with how our agencies like the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management and National Park Service are funded. For far too long, recreation has played second fiddle to logging and other resource extraction in terms of funding, staff allocation, objectives coming from on high in Washington, D.C. Designated wilderness and recreation areas make up just a tiny percentage of public lands compared to those that are prioritized for producing timber or minerals. And we feel that sustainable recreation, has to be a bigger part of public lands management priorities. So that's something that Oregon Wild has been working on and in cooperation with many others. We have seen some promising moves in the right direction just recently from Congress and under the Biden administration. Last year, the Great American Outdoors Act was passed, and that allocated funds for trail and bridge repair, renovating buildings, improving fish and wildlife habitat, and improving roads for recreation, with about 40 million of that earmarked for Oregon. There's calls for a new form of the Civilian Conservation Corps that could increase work around needed recreation infrastructure and improvements. And Senator Wyden's River Democracy Act, introduced this year, would designate more wild and scenic rivers, which are some of the best places to recreate in Oregon. So all of those are steps in the right direction, and we'll continue to advocate for them. Our ancient forests, pristine rivers, and wild places are, where I think most Oregonians love to go and play. So we will work on making sustainable recreation a part of our public lands management as best we can. And I really thank groups like Trail Keepers for keeping that in mind in all that they do as well. So,
and we've partnered a fair bit on the work towards expansion of the Mount Hood National Recreation Areas, which it's the long view, taking the long view, and we've been sitting at the table with folks from Oregon Wild and really appreciated that partnership and that balance, right, of preservation, conservation, and recreation in places, which is now actually being a great excuse to protect places from those other uses of the land that we're trying to transition from.
Cool. Well, Aaron, do you have any questions? We have a few minutes.
Yeah, well, one of them was about legislation in Congress, which you just handled, Chandra. But one thing that I've seen a lot of people talk about is, or kind of the response to talking about agency budgets is, oh, well, Trail Keepers is a great model of this. Why can't we just transition to much more volunteer-based management of these recreation areas? And I'm wondering, Steve, if you can kind of speak to maybe challenges you have in terms of staffing at the agency level and why that might not be necessarily a direction that would actually be good for the recreation experience, because you obviously have to interface with staff that help guide those decisions and those priorities. So I'm hoping you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Each and every single place that we have boots and tools to trail, it starts with on the ground trust and relationship from the field staff, trail builder on that land manager's team, to the supervisor, to the manager, to the district ranger if it's Forest Service, to the park manager if it's state parks, to all those trust levels. And it starts over when those staff get detailed over or promoted because they're the best and we'll miss them, but then now we got another person in that we have to rebuild. I think that's it's actually every single relationship that we embark in, it's cultivating trust, and it takes a lot of time. And ultimately it's comes from a place of scarcity of time and energy from the staff person who, I have a wonderful staff person who was a volunteer and an intern. And while he was working as an intern for us in the Columbia Gorge, he shared it as this. He's like, the agency staff have to work efficiently. They need to go through and they need to do the bare minimum to get it to either specifications of standards or just enough that it's safe enough and move on. Where cooperative partners can really thrive is thoroughness in stewardship activities of taking the time and doing the full breadth of care of that access to nature. And so, but then what you're saying is there's a ton of interest in supporting groups like Trail Keepers or others that do stewardship work. And all of a sudden we get a boost. But if that staff doesn't have the time to build trust and then allow us to do that, and then also supervise us and ensure that, it gets really tough. I have seen some motion of building more partnership coordinator positions in forests, more rec management staff people who are assigned to being partnership kind of intermediaries. So I'm seeing that change, and that's coming from things like Great American Outdoors Act funding, where they have a boost, but they don't always have the means to even do the improvement. And so they're turning to us as a cooperative cost share partner to lift us up. Yeah, that's a great, it's like, oh, great to have partners, but then if the staff are still dwindling at near zero or just barely getting their heads out of the toilets of the restrooms they're trying to clean, it doesn't, you're still going to see some consternation and frustration, and then no work being completed for sure.
Here's another question. How do we reach out to folks that are from outside Oregon that are coming here to recreate in terms of, essentially trail etiquette, or, warning them off places or activities that they shouldn't be doing?
Everyone kind of looks back at the whole Travel Oregon 7 Wonders campaign, and just like land managers and folks who were in the know during that time, I would probably say the park manager of Smith Rock State Park would probably be the one who would know the most, said, holy cow, how could you do this to me? Basically, everyone on the outside said, wow, that was a beautiful advertising campaign. I thought it was really cool. I think that folks like in the tourism are starting to recognize that. I put in the chat window that link to the Take Care Out There campaign. They are going hard at the tourists from afar that are coming to Oregon, and trying very hard to build that plan ahead before you go, be prepared, and build those same leave no trace principles, but in a broader sense of like tourism. And they're like literally putting those in toolkits to hotel chains and things like that, which is pretty, more power to them. Like they're really showing up, but more people are showing up. So how do you, it's like you add the highway lane and yet it's too late. I think it's gonna always be challenging.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't seen the research, of course, but well, I shouldn't say of course, I haven't seen the research, but does Travel Oregon reach all the types of people who are coming to visit, and are there media campaigns, reaching a diversity of communities? And, I know there's groups like Vive Northwest, for example, that does some Spanish translations and, videos in Spanish, to try to reach communities that maybe Travel Oregon is as well. But anyway, things, those sort of considerations are important. And so, for folks doing that sort of work, and it's not, it's not something that Oregon Wild necessarily has expertise in, or Trail Keepers for that matter, but making sure that that information is getting out to everyone in lots of different ways. So yeah, I think we can all just advocate for that.
And Chandra, I know that you actually have another presentation to get to. So
I do. So I'm gonna log off, but I'll leave you guys to it.
yeah, I've got a few more questions. Steve, you're in your a lot of the presentation was focused on kind of the post-fire recovery, but obviously there's a lot of user damage that happens. Some of it's just because there are a lot of people out there, but some of it is people not following trail ethics. What's the most widespread user activity or your pet peeve that trail keepers has to mitigate when it's out there? Is it like people who are cutting switchbacks? Is it user trails? Is it doggy poop bags everywhere?
I was gonna say, and this is, I hope this doesn't become, my dad used to call them dog tulips. That's probably the biggest pet peeve that you see. I actually think it's kind of like a systemic issue that I can't really blame the user. And this is the long view yet again, is there are not enough recreational trails for the amount of people that want to use them. And so how do we take the long view and plan out and build more, and more access, or design differently trail systems to be looping trails instead of out and back, or connective new trail segments that people can loop through or avoid. I mean, even designing and managing them differently, because I think my pet peeve is like, oh, I see people, off a trail or checking things out that are not. And it's because they're trying to access something that, is there a way to build a trail to a viewpoint better that isn't at the top of Munra Point, that people still want to get to, but is it something that we could help advocate for to design better? So that's my thing. It's like, the instance is the user denuding a natural area off a trail, but the actual problem or the theme or the reason is like, it's either management decisions or inability to keep up with the system needs or the user needs.
It's a great answer. And for our last question to wrap up, how does Trail Keepers decide what their next projects are, where you're going to go steward?
That's great. And in fact, this is a plug for people who are natural born leaders, but or what I like to just say straight up is, no one when they were 7 years old, except for my 4.5-year-old son, hopefully, no one says they want to be a trail keeper when they grow up necessarily. Maybe that'll change as we start to have more youth, but maybe Nelson Klein, who I see as a user here, I just saw a photo of him from when he was a kid with a hard hat on too. No one necessarily thinks that, and then they catch the bug. And one of my plugs for how we decide on trail projects is you, the people on this call. If you are an amazing people person and you like to volunteer and you catch the trail bug in like maintaining trails and everything like that, we have this great balance of like opportunity and strategy around what projects we take on. Sure, we have funding mechanisms that we go after, whether they be grants or fee for service or cost share agreements with the land manager. And sure, those are strategic and they help support us. And we're just starting to build those, by the way, with a very small staff. But then there's the stuff when we have amazing volunteer leaders who are skilled and passionate about a specific area. And they say, I can lead Tuesdays at this spot, and they get involved. And that is completely opportunistic. And so a lot of times that is how we've grown, is based on volunteers and their interest. We may have a relationship already with a land manager, but ultimately it hasn't been put tools to trail yet because we haven't had leaders to do it. So if you on the list of folks here, people listening are like, oh, I really care about this place and I would love to tend trail and lead a crew, and I'm a good people person. I'm safe. I keep people safe. We have fun and we get some service work done along the way. And all the while, like at minimum, making a safe and welcoming space for all people, because we have a mantra of, you know, everybody can be a trail keeper and there's ways to do it. I have 78-year-old volunteer crew leaders who go out 2 or 3 times a week on trail crews, and they're in I mean, they're doing it. And you know what? As a crew leader, I joke about this, that basically like while you may walk down the line and through the trail section about 3 times as much as anybody else, you probably do only 5% of the work as everybody else on your team. So hot hint, if you're like, oh, it sounds like too hard of work. If you're a hiker, you're probably already good. If you're willing to walk up and down a trail section and cheer the team on and make sure that they're doing everything safe and taking care of one another, that's the way. So to that question, it's strategy, sure, strategic opportunities, but also opportunistic with, if we have a volunteer leader who's willing and able, we'll be able to do it. So passion goes a long way.
Great. Well, that's a great note to leave it on. Thank you, Steve, for joining us. And thank all of you who are at home for joining us. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.